Great to see you all. Welcome everyone. Let's start with a minute of silence. Let's tune in. And I'd like us to see this as our time. This is time for ourselves. For me to connect with me, for you to connect with you, for us to connect with us. The time of connection, the time of deeper connection, truer connection. It's a space for just being. It's a space for connecting with parts of ourselves that we sometimes neglect to connect with. And maybe even parts of ourselves that we've never before connected with. Completely new dimensions of ourselves might be possible. And I'd like us to create sacred space. Even though this is a virtual meeting, we can create sacred space together. I'll give you a few examples and then I'll get you to give me some as well. So I invite into the space truth and truthfulness. I invite into the space my full spectrum self, and each of you, your full spectrum self, which includes your shadow self, your normal persona, and your highest, wisest self, and everything else in between. I invite our full spectrum self to show up. I invite into the space the part of us that is forever beyond space and time. I invite into the space gentleness and lightness and humor. I invite into the space the blessings of the enlightened ones, the awakened ones, those who've gone before us. What do you want to invite into the space? You can do it in your own mind. And if you want to put it in the chat window, you can. I might read out some of the things which you said. I invite into this space. Let's see what some of you are saying. I invite into this space love and harmony. I invite into this space love, acceptance, gratitude. I invite into this space clarity. I invite into the space acceptance and reverence of reality, exactly the way things are right now. I invite fearlessness into this space. I invite a cleaning agent to clean out the debris in my brain from anything that might be happening currently. And there are a lot of comments. So whatever you've written, each one of you, really feel that. And by feeling that, you are including it in the space. And if you like what somebody else has written, feel that as well. I invite into the space the sum total of what each of you has thought and written into the space, along with infinite blessings, infinite grace. Just be quiet for a bit. Just see if you can empty yourself. Empty yourself of everything now. Let's all take a deep breath. And if you want to, you can slowly open your eyes if they were closed. Very nice. Wonderful. There's something I came across which I found very profound and powerful. But it's funny that when I share it with other people, they don't often find it as powerful, but I'm going to share it with you anyway. I find it very profound. So it's quite simple, actually. I was curious about what do blind people see? People who are completely blind, what do they see? So I Googled this and I came across some articles. And the idea there was a blind person who was describing, because this person had been able to see in the past and then he'd gone blind. So he has an understanding of our world, right? Of what most of us experience. So you'd be surprised to find that blind people don't see darkness, because darkness is also an absence of light. So I love the way this person described it. Blind people see what you and I see at the back of our head. So right now, as you're looking here, I'm going to ask you, what do you see at the back of your head? And that's what a blind person sees. I found that really profound. So they don't see darkness. So it's not an absence of something. You see? So now what do you want to call that? You want to call that nothing? You know, even like it's hard to call it anything. What are you going to call it? Like, so in a way, what you get from all of these teachings is what you see at the back of your head. It's nothing, but it's also something, you know, it's fascinating. So you can't quite put your finger on it. So when I was in Thailand, there was a very interesting phenomena, which in the beginning, I just found very unbelievable. But it was so, what do I say? It was talked about so often, or there were just so many photographs of it, so many mentions of it, that I began to believe that, you know, there must be something to this. So the phenomena is something called, either it's called Sharira or it's called Sharirika Dhatu. And this is a phenomena when a person who's considered very holy or is considered a saint, when this person dies and they're cremated, then unlike normal people where there's just bones remaining, in these people's cases, some very interesting substances are remaining. And sometimes they're round, and sometimes they're shiny, and sometimes they're transparent, and sometimes they're like precious gems. And I said, how is this possible? I mean, this must be, their devotees must be putting something over there. My own teacher, Ajahn Chah, who was the least superstitious person you would find, the most matter-of-fact person. And in fact, when they were trying to write a very fancy biography for him, he said, please cancel, this is a rubbish biography. Talk about the challenges I faced. Don't put me up there in the sky. And even when he passed away and they cremated him, some very fascinating things happened. And his bones are not like normal bones. So they have a place in his monastery. They have a big, like a chaitya kind of thing. And it's like imagine a really big bell, basically. It's like a big bell, like a big golden bell. That's the shape it has. And in that, there is a transparent glass container, and it contains his bones, some of his bones. And these are like, you know, have you seen mother of pearl? How it glows, how it gleams. It's like fascinating, like, wow. So then I said, maybe there's something to this. Maybe just as crystals, like, you know, have you heard this joke? This mother graphite is telling baby graphite, don't trouble your father. Don't trouble your dad. He's been under tremendous pressure lately. And father graphite has become a diamond. So graphite under tremendous pressure becomes a diamond. In the same way, the crystals that you see are basically the normal elements, carbon or whatever, but they're in symmetry. When they come into a certain symmetry, then they become crystals. You must have seen various kinds of crystals, like amethyst or different kinds of crystals. And they are basically elements that have come into symmetry. So I said, is it possible that these beings have brought so much symmetry into their life that when they're cremated, literally their body itself demonstrates that symmetry, and it's shown as these dhatu. So I just found that fascinating. In fact, there was one monk that while he was still alive, he had to go for a surgery, and these doctors had to cut him open, and the doctors couldn't believe it. His bones had already begun to crystallize while he was still alive. Incredible. While he was alive, when they cut open his body, he's like, what is this? What's going on in here? Right. So now, whether you believe it or not, it just shows that there are some very interesting mysteries in our world, which we don't always understand fully. And maybe you aren't exposed to them, so it challenges your worldview. But when you get exposed to different ways of looking at the world, it challenges this. Like, have you heard of a famous monk called the Karmapa? He's one of after the Dalai Lama, he's the next most senior teacher in the Tibetan tradition. So the previous Karmapa, when he was on his deathbed, very fantastic phenomena was happening. So the doctors would observe every day his body was demonstrating different symptoms. Every day, different. And they couldn't figure out, is it this disease, is it that disease? His body kept demonstrating different symptoms every day. And while his disciples were very concerned, the Karmapa himself was very chill. He was just finding it all very, very funny. And different symptoms were showing up in his body. In fact, one day the doctor entered the room unannounced, and he was just standing at the door, and he saw the Karmapa looking up at his instruments. You know, all these hospitals, you're plugged up to all these instruments. And he's looking at the instruments, and he's playing with his pulse, he's playing with his heartbeat. But of course, when the doctor walked in, he just became a patient again. But he was doing all of these things. He was lying there, and he was actually playing around with all of those things. For him, it was a big game, right? And what for us looks like a tremendous, horrible thing, you're suffering, you're dying, you're in hospital. And from his disciples' perspective, he was working out a lot of stuff. So beyond a point, you don't have to work out your own stuff anymore. You're working out the stuff of others. In your body, mind, you're working out your stuff. I don't know how many of you here, in fact, quite a few people in general, they've had some experience of being empathic or being empaths, wherein you find that, you know, what I'm experiencing is not even my stuff. It's like I'm experiencing somebody else's stuff. It looks like I'm processing somebody else's stuff. Some of you may have had pets. And when you're sick, your pet seems to fall sick. And some people believe your pets sometimes process your stuff. They take on some of the stuff that you're going through, right? So in other words, are you even processing your own stuff? I was actually talking about something I was going through with my yoga teacher. She said, Nitya, this is not your stuff. You're living in a city, right? I said, yeah, this is city stuff. So that's great. Good to know. Maybe my stuff, who knows? But the point is interesting that, you know, it may not even be your stuff. For all you know, you're processing stuff from your environment that you don't even, and you're taking it, believing it to be your stuff. Or whatever it is, the work still has to be done, whether it's your stuff or somebody else's. But the thing is, don't make it so heavy. Don't make an identity around it. Oh, I'm like this, I'm like this. Maybe it's not you. Maybe it's just environmental toxins that you're picking up. And so the Karmapa, when he passed away, his body was cremated. But strangely, 3 parts of his body did not burn. His heart did not burn, his tongue did not burn, and his eyes did not burn. And there's actually a stupa somewhere in, I think it's in Bhutan or in Sikkim. There's a stupa for the Karmapa. And they've kept these 3 things that did not burn. And in Tibetan Buddhism, these 3 represent body, speech, and mind. Body, speech, and mind. And so he had reached such a level in his practice that his body, speech, and mind were indestructible. His heart did not burn, his tongue did not burn, and his eyes did not burn. This may all seem very fantastical, but it's nice to open your mind sometimes. A lot of things seem fantastical until you experience them. So I want you to do a little practice right now. If you can either close your eyes or keep them half closed. And normally you're used to seeing your body as flesh and bones. But now I want you to see your body in a different way. I want you to see your body as an energy system, a beautiful energy system. And just like they say, beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder. So the way you experience your body also lies in the eyes of the beholder. And right now, look at it as beautiful energy lines, framework of energy, a matrix of energy. And it can come in any way in your imagination. You might see colors, you might feel something. There's no wrong way of doing this. But I want you to change your normal perception of your body from a physical system to an energy system. It's not that hard to experience your body as vibration, pulsing, vibrating, a field of resonance. And now into this field of resonance, I want to introduce harmony. The moment I say the word harmony, something happens. I want to introduce deep acceptance, where everything is accepted exactly the way it is. I want to introduce seeing yourself as really precious. Normally we are told, don't think of yourself as something very special or whatever. But right now I want you to see yourself as really precious. You're a precious, precious being. Really precious. Deeply worthy, deeply deserving of all that is good. And just like the sky, where nothing can stick, no matter what you've done, no matter what you've left undone, no matter what thoughts and beliefs and conditioning you've had, your essential nature remains completely pristine and pure. And get in touch with your pristine and pure essential nature. And now I'd like you to see your body as a collection of crystals. Could be any kind of crystal. It's a beautiful collection of crystals. Could be the same crystal or many different kinds of crystal. Your nose is a crystal. Your eyes are crystals. Your brain is a really beautiful, powerful crystal. Your heart is a crystal. See the whole body as a crystal or a collection of crystals. And now what happens when the sunlight falls on this crystal? What happens when the crystal is purified and cleaned with the purest Himalayan water? Cool Himalayan water poured all over this crystal. And the sunlight continues to shine on this crystal. And what's it like to not just imagine this crystal, but to be this crystal? What does a blind person see? Just let go of all of these practices. Just be. Just empty yourself. You'll all take a deep breath. And you can either keep your eyes closed, or if you want to open them, you can. There's a beautiful practice in the Tibetan tradition where they make a gigantic mandala. This mandala represents the entire universe. You should be able to find it on YouTube. A lot of monks get together. It's a very, very intricate process. And like we do in India, we do Rangoli. This is like the PhD level of Rangoli, right? This is Rangoli at the next level. So literally there are dozens of monks working together to create a very intricate mandala, which is several feet wide, like huge, right? And Every square inch is like a work of art. That's how precise and beautiful it is. And they are creating a visual representation of the universe. You might have seen a picture of the Sri Yantra. So that is in India, that is our version of the universe. So this is not a Sri Yantra, but it's similar in their own way. They're using their own geometry and their own cosmology. They make a visual representation of the entire universe using a kind of a Rangoli practice, right? So it takes them, I don't know if it takes them weeks, it takes them a long time to make it. This is so intricate and it is so beautiful, it is so precise. It could easily be in the world's top museums. It would be considered a treasure in any of the world's top museums. Once it's made, the monks gather around and they chant. And they chant and they pray. And what are they doing? They're praying for the entire universe. They're praying for all the beings in the entire universe. And then, horror of horrors, somebody comes and just starts gathering up all the Rangoli. What? that was a work of art. What are you doing? And they just start gathering it up. And they make small pouches. And they give it away to the devotees. This could easily have been a work of art worth millions of dollars. And they just gathered it up in pouches and they gave it away. And there's a very powerful teaching here. That, you give it your best. You put your absolute heart and soul into creating something that's of absolute beauty. You bless it. And then you let it go. And how different that is from us. We put our heart and soul into something. And then we say, okay, now everybody should remember me for this forever. And now whole identity gets tied up with this. You see how different that is. And nobody knows the names of these monks. Nowhere is it written this monk did this. No, nobody knows. Anonymous monks came and nobody knows. No one's claiming any ownership of this. They came, they made something of exquisite beauty. They prayed for it, prayed on it. And then they gave that away as a blessing to all the devotees who came. And I don't know how, because I've never been a Tibetan monk, but I don't know what if the past life thing or whatever, but I seem to get a lot of these Tibetan practices. One of the main Tibetan practices in different traditions is you vividly visualize your deity. You're given each person after a while you're given a certain deity. That's your main deity. Just like in Hinduism, we have, like when you're born, you're told, okay, you belong, this is Hanumanji is your deity, or Ganesha is your deity. We all have our own deities. If you ask your astrologer, they'll tell you what your particular deity is. So in the same way, in the Tibetan tradition also, you're given a particular deity who you're supposed to. That's supposed to be the main deity you're supposed to work with. And so there is an image and there is a mantra, right? And the image starts off with a simple image, but gets more and more intricate as you go along. Because you see the deity, then you see the kind of clothes they're wearing, the ornaments they're wearing, the kind of, they all have different symbology, the different mudras they're holding, different things they're holding, different blessings they're giving. And it gets more and more intricate, not only the deity, but the people around them, the environment that they live in, the pure land that they live in, and the features of that pure land. And there are literally the scriptures that are thousands of pages long describing this. You can go incredibly deep. These visualizations can go tremendously deep. But the main point is, you visualize it, you say the mantra. So, yantra, tantra, mantra, right? Yantra is what you see. Mantra is what you say, and tantra is the body. So your body will go into certain mudras, and the mind will see the yantra, and the visualization, and the mouth will say the mantra. What are you doing? You're divinizing your thoughts. These are miraculous thoughts. These are miraculous words. These are miraculous actions. Because yesterday I was speaking to an expert in mudras. He's one of the country's experts in mudras. His name is Abhayji. And he was telling me how it began with his own physical ailment. And then he stumbled across this ancient art of mudras. And since then, he's traveled the whole country meeting experts, because this is a dying art in India. And he said he's been able to heal thousands of diseases just by getting people to hold certain mudras. And there are all kinds of mudras. Our fingers, they represent all the different elements. And holding our fingers in different combinations balances out these elements. And I was telling him how sometimes when I meditate, I'll open my eyes and I'll see my fingers have gone into a certain mudra. I said, he said, please send me a photograph. Please send me a photograph. I said, I don't know, it's happening by itself. He said, yeah. This is a natural part of our being. It's there and it balances things out. Right? So mudras, so at the physical level of mudra, at the mental level of yantra, so the tantra, mudra, and mantra. Right? What you're doing is divinizing your thoughts, divinizing your speech, divinizing your actions. So in the Vajrayana tradition, the belief is when you think like a Buddha, and you speak like a Buddha, and you sit like a Buddha, you are a Buddha. In that moment, you are a Buddha. So you visualize all of this, but you know how it all ends? Every visualization ends with dissolving everything. No matter how great the deity, you dissolve it back into clear space. No matter how profound the mantra, it ends in silence. Everything gets dissolved back into zero. And this is a good metaphor for our life. You're going to do all kinds of things in your life, and in the end, it's going to be one gigantic zero. And this is a very Western concept: leave a legacy, leave a legacy. There's no legacy that's going to survive the age of the universe. No legacy is going to survive. So please don't try to leave a legacy. Let me tell you, people who leave the most important legacy, these are people you've seen around you. The person who picks up your garbage, the person who cleans the railway platform, the person when you're walking in the airport and they're mopping, and even as you're walking, they're cleaning the bathroom. And even as you're walking, you've just dirtied what they just did. Now look at what kind of life purpose they have. We want to leave a legacy. Their legacy is getting ruined in front of their eyes. They just cleaned something and you just walked over it. Now this is like a bodhisattva, as someone who knows that no matter what they do, the garbage person knows no matter how many times they come to your house, tomorrow you'll have new garbage to give them. But they keep showing up. They keep showing up. Safai karne wala. We are the garbage ones. We are the garbage makers. They are the garbage. They are the ones to clean up, right? They are the safai wala. We are the garbage. We are the gandagi walas. So, and yet they do it again and again and again. There's something very powerful about that. The ability to show up again and again and again, knowing that, it's going to be the same. And yet you show up again and again and again. And at some level, a deep purification is happening. You're letting go of the sense that I have to make the world a certain way. So you do your best and you leave the rest. So to me, that is a very profound level of even that ego of look what I've achieved, look what I've done. Even that is gone. In fact, when Bodhidharma, who's a monk, Indian monk, he was invited to China to teach. So he goes to China and the emperor has heard of him. Already Buddhism is already there in China. So the emperor calls him and the emperor wants to show off. Look, I'm such a great Buddhist emperor. Look at how many monasteries I've made. Look at how many temples I've made. Look at how many Buddha statues I've made. And just for confirmation, he asked Bodhidharma, so I'm going to heaven. Which level of heaven am I going to? And Bodhidharma scowls and says, you're going to hell, man. He tells the Buddhist emperor, you're going to hell, man. Can you imagine first of all, what guts to tell the emperor you're going to hell? Because your ego is going to drag you down to hell. You've done all of this to just embellish your ego. This is the biggest ego. And there's nothing more sticky and dangerous in this world than a spiritual ego. Look at how great I am. Because everything else you can still say, oh, this is ego. But spiritual ego is a tough one. It's a tough nut to crack. And Bodhidharma is very disappointed. The emperor himself is like this. These people are not worth teaching. So he goes and he sits in front of a mountain cliff. Forget how many years, 13 years, 15. He just sits facing a mountain cliff. There's no one in this country worth teaching. He's just facing a mountain cliff. And then one devotee comes to him and he's coming again and again, please give me teachings, please give me teachings. And Bodhidharma refuses to turn around. This goes on for a long time. And finally, this disciple is so frustrated, he's not going to listen. He cuts off his own hand. He cuts off his own hand and he's crying in pain. I'm in agony, now teach me. I offer you my hand. I'm in agony, now teach me. And Bodhidharma turns around for the first time, looks at him in his eyes and says, what is happening? He says, I'm in agony, teach me. He says, show me who's in agony. And in that moment, he's awakened. Who is in agony? There's an illusory eye that's in agony. It's like, what does the blind person see? Nothing there. In that instant, he's awakened. So Bodhidharma's first disciple had only one hand. And then from there, Chan. I don't know if you know this, but Indian word dhyan in Pali language, or the spoken language of the Buddha, is jhana. The Sanskrit predates Pali, but the spoken language of the Buddha is Ardha Magadhi or Pali. So Buddha would say jhana. And when jhana goes to China, it becomes chan. And when chan goes to Korea, it becomes son. And when son goes to Japan, it becomes zen. So the word zen comes from the ancient Indian word dhyan. Dhyan becomes jhana, becomes chan, becomes son, becomes zen. So basically zen is the path of meditation, the direct path. So I like to think that everything we need, we already have. We've been given everything we need. It's right here. Right? One of my favorites, when people ask me to summarize what I have to share, I just say 3 words. Trust your process. Trust your process. And the more deeply you trust your process. Have you read this book, Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse? It's a book worth reading once in your life. Right? It's a short book, not a very big book. It's a book called Siddhartha. Are you trying to say something, Anjali? You're typing something? Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. It's about a person who follows his own path. And there are 3 things. He says, I've got 3 superpowers. What are the 3 superpowers? One of them is I can fast. I can wait. There's one more. He's got 3 of them. Do you remember? I can read. Is that what it is? Do you remember, Anjali? Write it down. Write it down. I can fast. I can wait. And I can think. Yeah, there you go. So he says, I've got 3 superpowers. I can fast. I can wait. And I can think. I think we all have these powers. He said, and with these 3 powers, so all the challenges he faces in his life, he's able to wait. He can wait days on end. He can go without food days on end. And he can think deeply about whatever's coming up. Not just superficially, but he can think deeply. I can fast, I can wait, I can think. And he follows his process. And his friend, like you hear the word Siddhartha, you imagine it's about the Buddha. But the funny thing is, this book is not about, Buddha is there in the book, but the Buddha is in the background. This is not, he and his friend both want to find the path to enlightenment. His friend goes and joins the Buddha, becomes a monk. And he says, no, I'm going to find my own path. And in a way, that's closer to the Buddha, because that's what the Buddha did. The Buddha left his own teachers and said, I'm going to find my own path. Right? So he followed the example of the Buddha. This is very beautiful. Theravada Buddhism is following the teachings of the Buddha. Mahayana Buddhism is following the example of the Buddha. And Vajrayana Buddhism is recognizing you're already a Buddha. And everyone you see is already a Buddha. I used to play this game, when I first came back from my monastic life and I was invited to teach. I play this little game where I think I've mentioned this before. I would sit and there'd be a group of people, whatever, 15, 20 people in front of me. So level 1, I would say, I'm the Buddha. These are all Buddhus. I'm the Buddha and these Buddhus have come to learn from me. All right, this is level 1. Then level 2, I'd say maybe, what if I'm the Buddha and they're the Buddhas? I'm the one who's not even met these people and I'm presumptuous enough to know what I'm going to tell them. How presumptuous of me to believe I know what I should teach them. That's super presumptuous. And I'm the one who's excited to teach. The one who's excited to teach cannot be a Buddha. So I'm the Buddha and they're the Buddhas. And these Buddhas have tremendous patience to come and listen to me, to entertain me for a while. All right. So that's a level 2. Level 3, oh, we're all Buddhas. I'm a Buddha and they're all, this is Buddha, this is the gathering of Buddhas. All the Buddhas are going to meet each other. And level 4, I'm just me and they're just them. I'm just me and they're just them. So what I just did was, I did some little mental gymnastics over here. And what happened was, I loosened the story. This first story is, I know more than you. Second story is, you know more than me. Third story is, we all know everything that needs to be known. And the last story, it just is. Not trying to be anything different. We just are the way we are. Right? And so this is very powerful. So can we be master storytellers in this world? I think there's a famous TED talk, not on this topic, but I like the name of the TED talk. It's I think something like the danger of a single story. Isn't that what it's called? Yeah? The danger of a single story. When you only have one narrative, it's very dangerous. In our country, we have this problem. People get stuck on one narrative. This is our main problem, not this ism or that ism, but your attachment to one narrative. This person is great, this person is not great, this religion is great. This is your one narrative is your biggest danger. Our country has always been a country of multiple narratives. And if you forget that, you forget the essence of what it is like to be part of this great country. Even our religion, it's very hard to pin down. In fact, the word Hinduism is a recent word, Sanatan Dharam, right? It is timeless, it is ageless. And you will find within this totally contradictory views, you will find atheism within this. You'll find theism within this. You'll find duality, you'll find non-duality. You'll find Vishisht non-duality, a special kind of non-duality, which is a kind of a tempered non-duality. You find all these things. You find great devotion here. You find great skepticism here, right? You find great mysticism. You find great rationalism, great logic over here. So this is our country. It's a country of great diversity. So can we bring in that diversity, or are we going to have the danger of a single story? So the willingness to listen more deeply. And I love this teaching by Max Mueller. Max Mueller used to say, to know one is to know none. If you only have one way of thinking, you really don't understand anything, right? You've got to be able to see it from many, 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 many perspectives. Knowledge is a point of view. Wisdom is a viewing point. Wisdom is the ability to see things from many, 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 many perspectives and say, oh, there's some truth to that. Oh, I can see it like that. Oh, there's some truth to that as well. Your ability to quickly shift from point of view to point of view to point of view, viewing points, that's wisdom. This is the difference between an expert and a master. An expert has a point of view. A master knows many viewing points, and you can see how that's also true, that's also true, that's also true. These two monks were arguing, and they couldn't come to a conclusion. So let's ask the teacher. So the teacher's in a small hut. So first person says, you wait, I'll go and ask. So he goes and asks. Teacher, he said this, I said this. I'm right, isn't it? Teacher smiles and says, you're right. He comes out. Look, teacher said, I'm right. So what nonsense? How could it be? You stay here, I'll go and ask. So second one goes and he bows. The teacher, he said this. It's got no logic to it. It's not based on any foundation. Look what I said is based on scriptures, based on everything. I'm right, isn't it? Teacher smiles and says, you're right. He goes out and says, I don't know what teacher told you. I'm right. Teacher told me I'm right. How can it be? So they both squeeze into the little hut and they bow down to the teacher. Teacher, you told him he's right. You told me also I'm right. We can't both be right. And teacher smiles and says, you're right. Nice advice given to married people is that whatever your spouse says, they're right. How can it be? How can it be? Whatever they say, they're right. You have to ask yourself, do you want to be happy or do you want to be right? If you want to be right, welcome to a dangerous and difficult life. But if you want to be happy, it's quite easy. Ajahn Brahm, one of my teachers, says, so this couple is walking, they're walking in the park. It's a beautiful walk. They're enjoying themselves. They're having a lovely, lovely walk. And suddenly they hear a bird call. And the wife says, hey, listen to that duck. And the husband says, honey, that's not a duck, it's a chicken. So what are you talking about? Don't you know the difference between a duck and a chicken? That's definitely a duck. It's a chicken. It's a duck. It's a chicken. And very quickly, duck, chicken, duck, chicken. And now tears are coming to the wife's eyes. It's a duck. And the husband says, what difference does it make? A duck or a chicken? He says, wait a minute, let me listen closely. You know what? I think you're right. I think it is a duck. Thank you. And she gives him a tight hug. And how many of our fights are duck and chicken kind of fights? I mean, what difference does it make at the end of the day? Right. So I came up with a cute little saying, little rhyme. I said, maybe you're right. In fact, when I used to be married, I really enjoyed my married life, by the way. Awesome. Good fun. So when I was married, I had this thing that, beyond a point, I will agree that she's right. Esther, I tell you, Esther, you're right. So whenever we'd get into a little bit of a tussle, I said, you know what, Esther? Maybe you're right. And she'd say, I am right. Then I said, maybe it's true. She said, it is true. And then we'd have a little laugh about it, right? And then after a while, she also learned. Then once in a while, then we'd get into a tussle. She said, maybe you're right. I said, of course I'm right. Maybe it's true. Of course it's true, right? So we made a little poem about it. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's true. So let's not fight because I love you. What a nice poem. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's true. So let's not fight because I love you. So life can be much more simple and pleasant if you don't get so hung up, don't get so stuck to our point of view. Hold it lightly, not tightly. Beautiful. So I'm having a 21-day course coming up on the 4th of September. And also today's session, if anyone wants to ask any question about this, it's going to be a pretty intensive course. So it's not meant for everybody. But if it is meant for you, then it's meant for you. You're going to be meditating for 3 hours. Not only meditating, but basically practicing. I really see it as a kind of tapasya. This is like tapasya. Tapasya. The word tapasya means it's a kind of burning. What are you burning? You're burning away all the stuff that's not serving you anymore. It's not like a physical burning, although you may even feel it physically. But it's burning away all the extra stuff, the peripheral stuff, the not needed stuff anymore. So much of our education is about accumulation. Very little is about letting go. We're only taught about gathering. So there's too much that's been gathered, including emotionally a lot being gathered. So it's going to be 21 days of letting go, 21 days of cleaning up. I don't know exactly what I'm going to be sharing. I'm going to be surprised myself. but it's going to be from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. India time for 21 days. And if you miss the morning practice for any reason, you can catch the recording, but only for 24 hours. So you have to do it within those 24 hours and for 21 days straight. So if anybody wants to ask me anything about this, I'll also give you a link later on before we end if you want to learn more about this. But if anybody wants to ask anything about this, happy to address it. Someone is saying, I'm receiving treatment for depression. Is it okay for me to attend? So you'll have to see, everyone's different, and you have to ask yourself, maybe even before you start, why don't you, for the person who's asked this question, just try for the next 2 or 3 days. On my website, I have a lot of 3-hour sessions. If you go to my website, belucid.in, you'll find a lot of 3-hour sessions. Why don't you just do a few 3-hour sessions and check what effect is it having on your depression? Is it getting too much for you to cope? And if it's getting too much for you to cope, then maybe this course is too intense for you. Maybe wait for another time. But if you're finding it actually helping, then maybe you can join this course. Eastern Standard Time, you can attend. You'll have to watch the, Sony, you'll have to watch the recording if it's Eastern Standard Time. Typically in those 3 hours, what percentage will be pure practice? I mean, I would say consider all of it practice, even if I'm sharing something. Like for example, today, I was sharing certain things and also we were closing our eyes. But don't think that only closing eyes is practice. Because when I'm sharing certain things, it may be updating your stories. Like for example, that cute little thing I said, maybe you're right, maybe it's true. So let's not fight because I love you. That could be something that changes your life for all you know, right? So it's all practice. Pariyatti, patipatti, pativedan. Pariyatti means you hear something. Patipatti means you apply it. And pativedan means it becomes a part of you. And all three are required. So there will be some pariyatti, there will be some listening, or whatever, maybe some watching, who knows. I also imagine there will be some physical element to it. It will not just be purely sitting. There may be some movement as well. But again, I'm not going to promise. I don't know what's going to come through. Can I join from Singapore time? Yeah, you can join. That's fine. We have some people joining from Singapore time. I'm not sure what you mean by follow. Can one follow? Follow, yeah. You can just watch the recording. So after I do this, I'll post a recording. And then whatever time zone you are, for 24 hours, you'll have access. And I have a very innovative, I think it's innovative. It's an innovative attendance system where 3 times in those 3 hours, I will give you a code word. And it'll happen at any time, right? There'll be a code word. And you got to give me those 3 code words. So you can't just imagine that I attend to the first 5 minutes, so I know the code word. The code word will show up anytime in those 3 hours. So unless you watch the entire 3 hours and done the entire 3-hour practice, you'll not know what those 3 code words are. So only when you give me those 3 code words, I know you attended the session. So wherever you are in whatever time zone, I think it's very innovative. Okay, what else is it? At what level of meditation should one be to attend it? That's all right. You don't have to be at any level. Anybody, even if you're a total beginner, it's going to be fine. Because it'll take you from where you are. You don't have to be a very advanced meditator for this. But of course, you should be ready to put in that kind of work, right? So if you're finding that even 5 minutes of meditation makes you jittery, so that's why I'm saying go listen to some of my recordings. And you might be surprised. There are people who, like, recently I had the 6-hour session on some of you there on solar eclipse day. And so many people send me messages saying, Nitya, I was sure I'll only attend for half an hour. But I'm so shocked I was there for all 6 hours. So many people send me messages like this, right? So you might surprise yourself, in other words. So don't limit yourself based on past experience. But at the same time, also don't overestimate your capacity. So maybe go and watch some of my stuff. And if you're finding you're able to sustain for an hour or 2, then maybe you're able to do this. Is there a charge for the program? Of course, there's a charge for the program. The charge is 1,08,000 for 21 days. And you can pay in US dollars or in Indian rupees. It's a very cheap program, I'm telling you, for what you're going to get. And there's a reason why it's costing so much also, by the way, right? See, right now, if any of you on this call right now, I can guarantee it, any one of you had a physical ailment, and the doctor said, it's going to cost you 1,08,000 rupees. You would muster up those lakh, and I guarantee it. Every single one on this call would muster it up. You would not think twice about it. Thank you for saving my life. But there are many of you here who might say, "Arey, but for spirituality, that's too much." That just means that your physical health is far more important to you than your spiritual health, and then that this program is not for you. I want you to value this program. And if I price it very cheaply, what's going to happen is on the third and fourth day, when the heat gets too much, the pasya starts heating up. Arey, yeah, it's okay. $4,000 doesn't matter. $5,000, leave it. But when you put you put your little heavy weight down. Now I put in the money. Let me just get through this program. I'm just going to do it. I made a promise to myself. So there's something about commitment as well. Right? But one thing you should know is if you complete the program and for any reason you feel that that was not worth my time, worth my money, you will get a complete refund of your money, but you have to complete the whole program for that. Right? So that's the financial part of the program. Any other question? Nitya, that is innovative. I want those code words. They're going to change every time. I don't know what they're Will there be assignments? And you know what? I'm going to keep it light on assignments because already 3 hours of the day is a lot. So I'm not going to give you assignments as such, but there will be certain practices to do throughout the day, which don't take time. So for example, one practice could be that open up your peripheral vision. Do it right now, right? So instead of just focusing, right now you're focusing on your screen. Can you open up your peripheral vision? And also open up the peripheral sound. So that didn't take time to do, but it does something. It creates a shift inside of you. When you have to open up peripheral vision, it opens up, it shifts something inside of you. So there are practices like this, which are not time intensive, but they are requiring you to get attentive. So there will be certain practices like this, but they're not like assignments. Because I think I'm taking 3 hours of your day. That's enough. I don't want to make you give more time beyond that. Right? But it may happen, and this is quite likely, that your inner being will guide you. That today I should do this. Today I should take out some time to whatever, go and visit that temple or go and, say something to my mother. That may happen. So in a way, you're going to give yourself assignments. And if that inner directive is coming, then you should follow that inner directive. You should prioritize that inner directive. Also, somebody was asking me about diet. Am I asking for a particular diet? Myself, I'm pretty particular about my diet. I'm vegan and this and that. But for this course, I'm not getting any specific guidance for diet. So whatever you eat, you will continue to eat. But I want you to be sensitive to yourself. If your inner being is saying, hey, stop that Maggi noodle business, then you stop it. Right? If your inner being is saying, don't eat so much fried food, then you listen to that. If your inner being is saying, okay, cut out the non-veg or at least reduce it, then you follow that. So I want you to listen to your own self. But the main point here is learn to listen to yourself. In fact, that's what I want. At the end of these 21 days, I don't want you to be dedicated devotees of Nitya Shanti. I want you to be dedicated devotees of your own inner wisdom. Because my aim is not to get devotees. My aim is to actually lighten the load. The more you people can become self-reliant, that's what makes me feel that I have done my bit. I don't want you to constantly be asking me for the next answer. You should check within, check inside. And only when after checking is not clear, then of course I'm available and other people are available. That's the way it should be. You should first stop should always be yourself. Sorry, don't think it's in rupees. How much? 1,08,000 in Indian rupees and $1,444 US dollars. Really loved your poem. Do intend to join. Challenge is getting up early. Yeah. So if challenge is getting up early, Dilip, in that case, you can think about creating 3 hours in your day where you can watch the recording, right? There is a special thing about, in India, we call it Brahma Muhurtam. There is something special about waking up at that hour. In fact, even brain science, you're a doctor, so you know this. Our brain chemistry is different at that hour. There are different levels of melatonin and things like that at that time in the hour, right? So there is something about that. But if your lifestyle will prevent you from waking up at that hour, then you can catch the recording in the next 24 hours. Approximately how many people did you expect to be part of this course? So the number that came to me is 114, but I don't know if you'll get that much. We have currently about half that much of already, those many people have already applied. And I'll be taking registrations till mid-August. So I'm not hung up on the number, but at some point I'll cap it. I'm not going to just let it go endlessly. But the number when I first announced is the number that came to me with 114. Let's see what happens. Not sure how I'm going to sit up at 4 a.m. Yeah. How wonderful. And okay, one more thing. You have to keep your video on. Because I know some people are going to be lying down in bed saying, hi, I'm attending. You got to keep your video on. There's got to be some semblance of, that you're showing up. Otherwise, it's very easy. Put on the video and keep on sleeping, and then, hi, wonderful, tathastu, I was there. What does it mean when you say peripheral? By peripheral, I mean, so like when I'm seeing, when the horses have this blinders on, they can only see in front. What happens if you take out the blinders of a horse? They see everything. So peripheral means on the sides. When you see peripherally, you're activating your parasympathetic nervous system actually. And when you're more relaxed, you see more peripherally. And when you're more stressed, you see more narrow. So even just seeing more peripherally will relax you a little bit. Even listening to sound you don't normally listen to will relax you. It works both ways. Relaxed will increase peripheral vision, and opening up your peripheral vision will relax you. Will you be doing this course again? I really don't know. I never know. So I can't promise I'll do it again. Is it going to be slightly similar to the intense Vipassana program? I mean, in terms of, we are going to be practicing quite intensely. So in that sense, and of course, my foundation, I began with Vipassana. So I'm sure there'll be elements of Vipassana that creep in, but I cannot say that this is going to be like a Vipassana program. Vipassana is, in a way, they stick to only 2 or 3 things. Vipassana, they stick to breath, they stick to becoming aware of sensations, and they stick to loving kindness. And I'm not going to stick to those 3 things. So it's going to be broader than that for sure. Because I'm not that, my spirituality is a little wider than just 3 things. Will it become too emotional? I can't say that. It might, and how good that is, how good it is to become aware of our emotions. There's a lovely teaching. In fact, just someone today said, my version is fully feeling what you're feeling is very healing. That's my version. Fully feeling what you're feeling is very healing. But I heard a different version today. My friend told me, what is the name of the singer? Alanis Morissette, something. What is it? Morissette. Likho kya naam hai? Something Morissette. Yeah, Alanis, something like that. Alanis. So she says this. She says that if you follow any feeling all the way, at the end is peace. Beautiful. How well said. If you follow the thread of any feeling all the way, at the end is peace. So of course, my way of saying it is, you follow any feeling all the way, at the end is Nitya Shanti. Okay. Is it okay for beginners to join? Yeah, I don't know what you mean by beginner. In my experience, if you've shown up for a call like this, and if you're interested in a course like this, you're not a beginner. Beginners can't be attracted to things like this. Even if you're attracted to 21 days of waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning, I do not consider you a beginner. At least you've done some work in past lives, if not this life. Nobody gets attracted to things like this. Otherwise. Then, yeah, what else do we have? Emotions. Yeah, so emotions may come up and you welcome the emotions, whatever comes up. See, basic thumb rule. I used to go to my teacher all the time asking many, many, many questions. And finally, one day he said, listen, Nitya, listen. My name back then was Jnanasanti. Other monk is Jnanasanti. Whatever happens in meditation is good. Whatever happens in meditation is good. So you're getting a backache, that's good. You're getting a vision, that's good. You're seeing ghosts, that's good. Nothing is happening, that's also good. Whatever happens in meditation is good. This is a lovely thumb rule. Because you're doing something good, so now whatever happens is good. If old traumas are coming up, fantastic. If you're getting fantastical dreams, fantastic. You're getting no dreams, fantastic. Whatever happens is good. Trust your process. How many hours of sleep is good sleep? Now, what's going to happen, Radhika, is your sleep is going to change a little bit. When someone practices for 3 hours a day, don't believe the normal stuff of how many hours of sleep you need. Well, I've seen this for myself. When I was a monk, I would get by sometimes on 2 hours of sleep, 4 hours of sleep. And on average, I never slept more than 5 hours as a monk. But that's because I was meditating hours and hours a day. Now that I'm meditating a little less, I need a little more sleep. So on average, I need about 6 hours of sleep. But you got to see for yourself, right? So the normal rules of sleep don't apply when you're doing intensive practice like this. So then you got to trust yourself. And it may happen that some nights you're just wide awake, no sleep is coming. But don't get tense. Then you continue your practice. There is some reconfiguration happening inside of you, right? So you got to learn to trust. No sleep means no sleep. Maybe later in the day you have to sleep. You sleep a little while, no problem. You just trust yourself. So your sleep rhythm may get disrupted, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Of course, we're not saying undersleep. Do go to sleep early if you want to wake up early. I'm not going to say don't sleep. Of course, sleep is important. But be ready have different kinds of sleep experiences than you normally have. And some of you may start having strong dreams. Like in my case, the dream world became very, very vivid for me as I began meditating. And it may happen to some of you as well, right? Between attending live and listening during the morning hour due to time zone, what would you recommend? I would always recommend wake up live, but again, in some time zones, you just can't do it. So then in that case, watch the recorded session and don't feel there's anything missing. You do it wholeheartedly, you get all the benefits. Is the intention of the course from your side to activate the light body in the participants? The intention that I have is for you to go through a process of tapasya. You know, every single one of us is going to go through tapasya. Chances are, before you die, there'll be a tapasya that happens. There'll be a burning that happens. Yeah, when your death approaches, a tapasya is going to happen. Now, if you've never done tapasya in your life, you're going to get flabbergasted at that time. You'll not know how to deal with it. So the wise ones do the work before the work has to happen, right? So put in the work. You already put in 9 months. In your mother's womb, you sat in one position for 9 months. Once in a while, you kick a little bit. But 9 months of tapasya you've already done to come into this world. It took you 9 months of solid tapasya, floating around in amniotic fluid. You know what amniotic fluid is? It's mostly your own pee. You were floating around in your own pee for 9 months. That was the kind of tapasya you did to come into this world. And now it is another tapasya you have to do to access the next dimension of your journey. That this lifetime, there are many, many dimensions, right? So in a brief way, we did it right now. We shifted your perspective from a physical body to an energy body to a crystalline body, to pure light permeating that crystalline body. So I would just say my intention is to put this out there, and whatever each one of you needs to get out of it, you will get out of it. My teacher said something very nice once. I asked him, why do we practice? And he looked at me straight in the eyes and he said, we practice to practice. He didn't say you practice for nirvana. He didn't say you practice to practice. I love that answer. So even though it's got a bombastic name like light body activation, you practice just to practice. That's it. And then what needs to happen will happen. Right. And so just like the Tibetan monks who make that fantastic mandala and then destroy it, they make this fantastic mandala of the universe and then they just immediately ruin it, right? In other words, they let it go. That's what they're really doing. They're letting it go. So in the same way, you can create the most powerful intention for this course, but then when you step into the course, you let it go. My friend Shubha Patvardhan, fantastic dancer, she was with me in my MBA school. And she was learning Bharatanatyam from one of the top teachers in India. Her teacher was extremely demanding, extremely exacting, total disciplinarian. One wrong step, one wrong move, one wrong look, you get shouted at. And she practiced like this for a long, long, long time. But the funny thing about her teacher was whenever they had to get on stage, the first thing you do is, of course, you're all dressed up and everything. You go and touch your teacher's feet. And she'd whisper in their ear, now forget everything I taught you. I love that. So she's such an exacting teacher, such a precise teacher, such a demanding teacher, such a disciplinarian of a teacher. But just before the actual performance, she'd bless the student to say, now forget everything I taught you. You see the kind of freedom she's giving? There's a real magic in that. Now don't worry about pleasing the teacher. Now let the flow happen. So in the same way, you come with your intention, I'll come with my intention. But when we step into the arena, we should now forget our intention and just get into the fire. Now what has to happen will happen. Is it 21 days consecutive? Yes, consecutive 21 days. It's every day. You know, this is funny. When I went to my monastery for the first time to become a monk, I met this American man and he'd been there for a few days before me. So he asked me, hey, so what are you here for? I said, I've come here to become a monk. I said, oh. You know, I said, I like this place and I like the monks over here, but I've got one problem with this place. I said, what's that? I said, they don't have holidays. They're a monk every day. So I like to have my beer on the weekend. I like to meet my girlfriend once in a while. I don't want to be a monk every day. I found that hilarious. So he wanted a holiday. He said, yeah, monk and all is good, but we need a holiday, right? And I was playing with him. I said, yeah, for these monks, every day is a holy day. So that's why they don't need a holiday. So when you're a monk, every day is a holy day. So when you practice like this, every day is a holy day. You're not going to get a holiday. You have to go through. In fact, I want you to be there for every single day. In fact, that's part of the commitment. Even if you're sick, I want you to be there. I want you to sit there with your fever and go through with us. right? So in other words, make a really strong mind. No matter what comes, I'm going to do this. And for whatever reason I missed the live session, fine, I'll catch the 3 hours later in the day. But within those 24 hours, I will definitely do it. It's like, you don't say that, oh, my kids are at the bus stop. They've come back from the school, they're at the bus stop. Today, I don't feel like picking them up. Aaj mood nahi hai. Today, I've got a fever. Today, it's raining. Today, the bai hasn't come. Doesn't matter. You got to go and pick up your kids. You got to pick up your kids. You got to pick up your kids. It doesn't matter. Bai has not come. Rain or sunshine, fever or COVID, doesn't matter. Go and pick up your kids. I want you to have that kind of a strong mind. This has to be done means it has to be done. And just once in our lifetime, we should make a strong commitment to ourselves. We make commitments to our employers. We make commitments to others. When have you made a strong commitment to yourself? What if you feel sleepy during the day? Yeah, if you feel sleepy, then just sleep for a while. Rest, right? Do what you can. All right. Will it be different or similar to the 2 or 3 hour sessions? I mean, it'll be similar in some sense because at some level, everything I'm sharing is similar, but it'll be different because this is like we're building up day by day by day by day. So there's definitely going to be some build up that's happening. Right? Someone saying already my dreams are very intense. You know what's really a dream? This world is a dream. There's a nice teaching that when you're awake, you should tell yourself this is a dream. Many times in the day, you should tell yourself this is a dream. And when you're sleeping, you should try to be awake within your dreams. So this is actually this is how the yogis live. For the yogi, the waking world is the dream world. In the sleep, they're awake. While living, they consider themselves like they're dead. You know why these what are they called? The Aghori Babas. You know why they put ash over themselves? Why do they put this? And the ash is not normal ash. It's often the dead body, the ash of the dead body. The reason they put ash over themselves is to remind themselves, I'm already dead. It may seem like a repulsive practice to you, but it's actually a very profound practice. You rub that ash over to remind that this body is also ash. It's a matter of time. The only difference between this and that is just time. But this body is going to be that ash very soon. So you rub ash all over your body and you remind yourself, I'm already dead. So the wise ones, they live like they're already dead. And when they're dying, they're maximally alive. If you've ever had a near-death experience, you know that was the most alive experience of your life. Right? So better to have a near-death experience than a near-life experience. Like you spent your whole life. My teacher said there are many people who live their entire life. They're not even aware of taking one in-breath. So at the end of your life, are you going to say, I had a near-life experience? I almost lived. Right. It's better to have a near-death experience than a near-life experience. If I have normal day-to-day obligations with kids and all of that, will it be possible? So Shubhra, you'll have to check for yourself whether it'll be possible or not. Again, I cannot decide for you. And so if your day is that difficult and busy and so many responsibilities, then maybe this is not the right time for you. All right. So I'm not going to make promises in the air saying that, oh, you'll be able to manage everything. You'll have to check. There may be some sacrifices you have to make. There may be some help you need. So check for yourself. Deepa is saying, I'm fascinated by floating in your own pee. Who would have thought your own pee has been crucial for your own development? Yeah. I have a doubt how to tackle day-to-day life, which is why, so it's not starting right away. It's starting a month from now, more than a month from now, right? It's starting 4th of September. So you have plenty of time to figure out. There's no rush. And this call, like I don't have an agenda in this call to convince you to join. So I'm not giving, I would actually actively, in fact, I think if you're unsure, then I would say don't join. I'm not going to try to convince you to join. But when something deep inside of you says yes, then you should definitely join, right? Good. That's the end of the question from what I can tell. And if I haven't answered one of your questions, then if you can just raise your hand, I give you a chance to speak. Then you can ask your question. Or if there's any other question that you haven't asked. Anybody? Yeah, D, go ahead. Let me unmute you. You can unmute yourself, D. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Nitya. So I wanted to ask, like, is this course going to be like exempt from tax? Like, can you claim tax exemption?
You can't claim tax exemption. You got to pay taxes. Even I'm paying my taxes, so you're told to pay. Somebody was trying to pay me in cash, and I said, "Why do you want to pay in cash? Just pay normally, yeah. Let the government also get a bite."
Okay.
Government also needs our blessings, right? This is all blessed money that's flowing in. This is I believe, I would like to think, I don't know if it's going to happen, but I would like to think that you look back in your life and say, this was the best 1 lakh rupees you spent in your life. This was better than any vacation to Bali. This was better than any medical intervention you've ever had. This was better than any surprise party you threw for anybody. This was better than even your marriage. And I bet you spent many lakhs in your marriage. And then you wondered, what did I do that for? So I want you to think this is the best money you've ever spent. And there should not be this one tinge of a thought that, oh, but I skipped on the taxes. Why should you skip on the taxes? If you're part of this country, then just pay your taxes. Do you know in the highest taxes in the world are paid by people in the Scandinavian countries? And you would imagine these would be the most unhappy countries in the world. You know what? They're the happiest countries in the world. Norway, Denmark, Sweden. Some of the happiest countries in the world, they pay crazy amounts of tax. They pay 50, 60% of tax. Right?
Yeah.
And then you say, oh, but their governments are better and all that. But you get the government that you deserve. If we are skipping on taxes, the government will also skip on taking care of us. That's how it goes. You know, if you're going to cut corners, they're also going to cut corners. So yeah, so this is, I do have a not-for-profit, but it gets very complicated for me to use the funds from that not-for-profit. But I'm supposed to use up all the funds within the same year. So I don't really use it beyond, apart from a few events. So there's no tax exemption.
Okay, that's fine.
How wonderful.
And it's 4 a.m. to 7 a.m., right?
India time.
India
yeah.
time.
What
So
time is it for you? You're in
me.
Chicago, right?
For me, yeah, for me it'll be 5:30 p.m. So it's totally doable.
It's doable, okay.
Yeah,
you don't
5:30
not
to
working
8:30.
at that time?
I mean, I'm working from home, so you know, I
can
easily log off at 5 o'clock, and then if I need to take care. But thank you.
So from Brahma Muhurtam, you'll have Sandhya Muhurtam, evening time.
I'm just wondering if he'll turn my husband any more back here than I've already turned him in the last 6 months. I think he's convinced that nothing's working for me.
You should speak to your husband. He has to be on board with what you're doing. Yeah, make sure he's on board.
He's like, you should sign up for this. Despite me turning him on, like crazy the past few days, he's like, yeah, you should sign up. So definitely. Thank you.
Girija is asking, is there a reason why you're doing it at 4 a.m.? Girija, this is very hard to explain, but these things come to me. So I get these. I was one day inspired to do a 1-month course. And this is one thing I like about myself. No matter how crazy my idea, that I just go ahead and do them. So then we created a 1-month course and people showed up and we had a 1 full month in the Himalayas. We spent 1 month meditating. And then I had the thought of creating a 3-year, 3-month and 3-day course. And now some of you here are part of that. We are into the second year of that course. 3rd year, coming to the 3rd year of our course. So I just follow these intuitions, and the intuition said, create a course for 21 days, starting at 4 a.m., going till 7 a.m. There's a nice teaching that each of us is living in our own PDS. We are all living in our PDS. What is PDS? Personal delusional system. We're all living in our personal delusional system. So this is my personal delusional system, which says wake up at 4 o'clock and practice till 7 o'clock. And those who like my personal delusional system can come and join me. Is there any other course you're starting soon like Rigpa? Not right now. No. What is light body activation? Yeah, light body activation is, in a very simple way, when I began meditating, I discovered something. Every time I'd meditate, no matter how difficult the meditation was, when I'd get up, I'd feel lighter. I would see clearer. It's literally you see clearer. I would see clearer. I would taste more. I would hear more clearly. I would feel myself more clearly. I literally felt lighter. So in the simplest way, light body activation is living lighter and living brighter. And then, as we all know, what we consider to be physical body is also pure energy. E is equal to mc squared. It's all energy, which is why the X-ray can penetrate your body. Otherwise, if it was such solid stuff, X-ray could never penetrate your body. Right? But X-ray can penetrate your body. So between your body's energy, your body is an energy system. And even deeper than that, scientists tell us that everything is photoreceptive and phototransmittive. Everything is pure light. And even deeper than that, everything is pure consciousness. So in our journey, I want you to change your predominant belief system from I'm a physical body. And of course, you are a physical body. We're not denying that. But what's your way of thinking about yourself? And I want you to think of yourself not only as a physical body, but as an energy being. When you start seeing yourself as an energy being, something tremendous happens. Traumas get resolved faster. Healing happens faster. Because it's energy, right? Energy is always flowing. I had a friend who came to stay with me. She and her boyfriend were staying for a night. And her boyfriend had a tremendous headache in the morning. And he gets these migraine attacks, a tremendous migraine attack. And I said, now what happens? He says, no, now this is going to last all day. It always lasts all day. So I said, oh, let's try something. And I know a simple system where you change your way of thinking of yourself from a physical body to an energy body. So I said, now for a moment, think your body is an energy system. And what you're feeling in this head is just blocked energy. And just repeat the following sentences. You can also repeat it if you like. Relax and flow. Where do you want to go? Relax and flow. Where do you want to go? And we just kept saying it for 5 minutes. He kept talking to the sensation in his head. Relax and flow. Where do you want to go? Relax and flow. Where do you want to go? And he said, I don't believe it. It's gone. I can't believe it. It's finished. It always stays for the whole day. So when he shifted his paradigm from physical paradigm to energy paradigm, there was a tremendous shift which happened. So when you shift your predominant paradigm to I'm an energy system, healing speeds up. I gave you the story of the Karmapa. The Karmapa was enjoying his physical illness. He was looking at his instruments. Because when you see yourself as pure light, then what you're experiencing the collective. So the pain I have is no longer my pain. I'm processing the pain of the collective. And when you're processing the pain of the collective, that's not called karma, that's called karuna. It's compassion. Now this is now compassion gets activated. I'm doing this on behalf of everybody else. You know, I was very moved when the nuclear disaster happened in Japan. You were all there. You saw the news. The tsunami happened, and the big waves came. The earthquake happened, and the big nuclear disaster happened. To clean up this nuclear disaster, people went in. Now imagine they're putting their lives at total risk. This is a radioactive zone, and no matter what covering you put on your body, you're going to get exposed, man. You're going to get exposed. Now, what courage for these people to go in day after day after day to clean up radioactive waste. These are bodhisattvas. These are not ordinary people, right? Now, that's a totally different level of consciousness. I'm willing to sacrifice my own health for my country. And of course, our soldiers do it as well. Soldiers of all countries do it, right? So like this, you start shifting to a different paradigm, the paradigm of lights. And then beyond that, in consciousness, it's fascinating. You know, right now, I'm only talking to myself. I've always only talked to myself. I'm trying to convince myself to believe something. I'm trying to teach myself. I'm only teaching myself. I've only met myself my whole life. And this is where instantaneous healing happens. But you can't force this. But when it happens, this is how it happens. Instantaneous healing. I worked with a lady once who had witnessed a murder before her eyes. She had seen someone's throat being slit before her eyes. And you can imagine the trauma she went through. And I asked her who she believes in, who is the most powerful being she believes in. So she believes in a teacher called Mahavatar Babaji. Babaji is a teacher of the Kriya Yoga tradition, right? And in a way, this course is also coming through Babaji. So she said, I believe in Babaji. I said, all right. Now, is Babaji only some place or every place? No, Babaji is every place. Is Babaji only at some time or every time? No, Babaji is in every time. Is Babaji only in some people or all people? Babaji is in all people. All right. So by your own definition, the person who got killed is Babaji. The knife that was used is Babaji. And the person who did the killing is Babaji. Babaji killed Babaji. And as we spent 15 minutes on this, the entire trauma, which could have been PTSD, it could have been lifelong trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, it was done. It was gone. Her bad dreams stopped. Her nightmares stopped. Her sense of helplessness and her self-blame disappeared. It was done. When you see life as consciousness, as unitary consciousness, instant healing occurs. So what is light body activation? It is a shift from seeing yourself as a physical body in a physical universe to an energy body in an energy universe, to a light body in a light universe, to pure consciousness, experiencing pure consciousness. And then not even that. Even that's a story. Who are you without all these stories? Nitya, I have a question. What are the most profound realization you've had from your training as a monk? It is not something to be shared in a Zoom call just like this. That would be very cheap. And you probably wouldn't even get it, right? So while it's a good question, you're not getting an answer to that. And even you, why would you, if somebody was to ask you that question, why would you just talk to anybody about that? Do you reveal your private parts to anybody who asks you? I bet you don't, right? So these are things that are between you and your source, and at the most between you and your teacher. These things are not to be talked about in general. right? There's a story of a turtle. There was a turtle who lived in a pond, and these migratory birds would come. And he'd make friends with them every time, but then again, migratory birds after a few months they'd fly away. So he really made good friends with these cranes. And one day he confessed to them, I'm always jealous of you. You guys fly so high in the sky. I spent my whole life in the water and on the land. I've never flown, and I wish I could fly. These cranes have a lot of compassion. This poor turtle has never flown. He just wants to fly. Let's find a way to make him fly. So they find a stick and two strong cranes. They said, we're going to hold two ends of the stick. You hold the middle, you bite onto the middle, and we'll help you fly. So the turtle agrees, and he bites onto the stick, and the two cranes take off. And my goodness, for the first time in his life, the turtle is flying, the turtle is flying, the turtle is flying. Right? And on the ground, people are seeing, what is going on? What is going on? What is going on? What is going on? And some children began teasing, stupid turtle, stupid turtle, stupid turtle. And they start teasing him, look at the stupid turtle. And the turtle says, how can they call me stupid? I'm flying over here. And the turtle opens his mouth to answer them. And that's the last thing he ever says. So my teacher would tell the story and say, the moral of the story, you probably got it already, is when you get to high places, whenever you get to high places, zip it. Don't talk too much. You're going to just get yourself into trouble. Right? And if you ever think you're enlightened, by the way, don't even announce it to yourself. That's where the spiritual ego begins. Right? Don't even announce it to yourself. My teacher said, and they say, go home and check how enlightened you are with your mother, how enlightened you are with your family. It'll all come out. All your enlightenment will come out. So don't pretend yourself beyond your enlightenment. Can we know who is your yoga teacher? Yeah, I will check with her. She's quite private. So I'll check with her if she wants to be. Someone asked me who is my yoga teacher. I'll check with her if she's willing for me to mention. She works with very few people. And the funny thing is, I've had many classes with her. She's not taught me a single asana till now. She said, too many people think yoga is all about asana, but yoga is a big galaxy and asana is one tiny part of it. Right? And she's not taught me a single asana till now. We just talk and she checks my breathing and she checks my practice and she checks how my emotional life is going. It's fascinating. It's good to meet a genuine practitioner like this. But I'll check with her. Yeah. Tell me how to avoid eating all the time when we feel like this time during lockdown. How to avoid eating all the time. I don't really know. You'll have to see what answer is coming. I don't really have an answer for that. Eating plan. Yeah, check the eating plan. Yeah. Good. I think we're done with most of the questions for today. Let's take a minute of silence. Just empty yourself. मेरा मंगल मेरा मंगल मेरा मंगल होए रे तेरा मंगल तेरा मंगल तेरा मंगल होए रे सभी का मंगल सभी का मंगल हो रे। जन जन मंगल, जन जन मंगल, जन जन सुखिया हो रे। दसों दिशाओं के सब प्राणी मंगल लाभी हों रे। निर्भय हों निर्वैर बने सब, सभी निरामय हों रे। तेरा मंगल, तेरा मंगल, तेरा मंगल हो रे। मेरा मंगल, मेरा मंगल, मेरा मंगल हो रे। सभी का मंगल हो रे। समस्त लोका सुखिनो भवन्तु, समस्त लोका सुखिनो भवन्तु, समस्त लोका सुखिनो भवन्तु। ओम शांति शांति शांति। One of my teachers, Goenka ji, was teaching meditation in Tihar jail. Tihar jail is one of the biggest jails in India, in Delhi. And they had organized a mega course, 1,000 inmates. This is the first time in the history of Indian prison system, 1,000 inmates. And he'd gone to oversee the preparations of this. And there's a video of him walking around and just talking to some of the inmates. And they're very curious, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And Goenka ji responds, and his face is bright. His face is kind of filled with, happiness, and he's filled with rapture, literally. And he's talking to these inmates, these prisoners, and saying, "Kya hoga yahan par? Kya sikhayenge aap?" And he says, "Tapna hoga, tapna hoga." Bahut sukh se, bahut sukh se. I love those statements, those lines. Tapna hoga means you'll have to go through the fire. He didn't say, "I'm going to give you happiness," and you have to go through the fire. Tapna hoga, but then he added, bahut sukh se, with a lot of happiness, with a lot of joy. And you know that whatever you're going through to put an end to it. Normally, we go through life, we only add on more stuff. You go through the fire, you add on more stuff. Oh, poor me, and poor this, and poor that. But this time, you go through the fire to put an end to stuff. So now, whatever emerges in those 21 days, and whether or not, I believe whether or not you guys join, because you joined today's call, at some level, you're energetically connected with this. So, best of luck. You're energetically connected with us. And so you are also going to go through it. Whether you join us or not, you're going to go through it. Tapna hoga bahut sukh se. So now you welcome it. Bring it on, bring it on, bring it on. And this is coming to say goodbye. This is coming to say goodbye. This is coming. When you think like that, it's coming to say goodbye, then it's not a problem. And then truly, it elevates you. And just like the child in the womb has to go through the crisis of birth, we will go through our own crisis, bahut sukh se, and we will be born into our truer life, into our truer essence. Right. Beautiful. Thank you all for joining today's call. Thank you. Lots of love. Lots of love. Mayurma, if you know how to make a Mayurma, the way of sending good wishes. And we say together, Mayurma. Lots of love. Chali. Be well.